they are on election cycles and generally need to show proof of progress within a relatively short period of time in an economic development cycle for anything project related or longer term, of course. So the challenge for a elected official is to show progress towards an economic development goal in a short election cycle. And that can be very, very challenging. My advice is always to understand strategically where you're going as a community or as a region, and at the same time build in some quick wins along the way that build community support for where you're going, and you can show progress in the short term.
I think a lot of elected officials tend, when you're in an election, a lot of them say, yeah, I'm running on the platform of economic development. And most don't know what it means. And I get that, because even people in the field, it's hard for us to explain to our parents, our colleagues, when they say, well, what field are you in? You say economic development, then they just glaze over. They go, huh? Well, I don't even know what that is. So, I think the first thing is understand what it is. And the best way to do that is take training. We offer this course in economic development. And it's like for elected officials, it's like, what is your role? Understand it is different. If you're an elected official, your role is different than a person who's actually in the role of economic development as a practitioner. So understand what your role is. Hire people that know what they're doing. A lot of people end up in this field from all kinds of different professions. And it's important that you get someone who actually has training in the field. They don't just come from, hey, I was in business development. Oh, I was a realtor. I was a marketer. Try and hire for skill sets, someone who knows what they're doing. And the other thing I think for elected officials is important to understand, economic development's a long game. It doesn't happen like overnight. A lot of the foundational pieces you're going to put into place, it might take years for that to actually come to fruition, some of the stuff that you're working on today. So, I think those would be some of the easy things, the simple things that I would give for advice.
Each community has done a lot of good work trying to determine their community's capital and labor and resources. What the people need to really watch for is what is unique to your area, what can you do to stimulate or provide financial support to the small enterprises, and then watching their growth to support them to make sure they get over the hump of actually developing.
One, be knowledgeable about what in their community makes it a saleable community. Understanding, where your wins are going to be, because not every community can have everything. I think the second thing is realizing that people live in a community. There was something that attracted them to a community, and that's why they chose to live there. And always striving for the biggest wins in a community doesn't necessarily meet what that community wants. It might meet the idea that we have economic development, we'll increase tax revenues and such, but is it what really makes your community? And as an example is, if you have a community that's within relatively close proximity to a larger center, tends to attract people who enjoy living in a smaller community. You shouldn't strive to want to be your bigger community that's next door. Remember what makes your community valuable and cherish that and work towards that. And I think the third part is education. I do know that the Economic Developers Association has a number of courses for elected officials. Having knowledge and understanding processes of how economic development works, and not expecting huge successes constantly from your economic development officers or your department is crucial, because you're going to be disappointed a lot if that's your expectation.
First of all, to understand what economic development actually is, and the turnaround, the life cycle of economic development programming. That will help to manage expectations. Second thing is the same advice really for anybody who's involved in economic development. Build your relationships, build them out broadly, and know as you're building those relationships what your message is on behalf of the community or region that you're talking about. And the third thing is to understand the relationship really well between an elected official and if you have administrative staff, if you have an economic development officer, if you have somebody in that role, and understand how an elected official and their relationships and their skill set and their networks can work really well with an economic development officer or an economic development coordinator, and putting those two together really leverages everybody's skills and connections.
One of the things, and I find this, it's very basic, but it's underutilized. Have good data, because the decisions you're going to make, if you don't understand truly where you're at as a community and what, like, real good data, and I'm talking like, what businesses are in your community? How many people do they employ? Where are their markets? All of those things. What are the challenges that they're facing in order to expand in your community or invest more? So really that fundamental piece to me is data and understanding what's there. It's also community economic development. It's a process. You know, that's another thing that I think they need to understand. It's developing and diversifying over time. It's like, what are your goals? How does that fit into where you want to take your community? What's your vision? How does that kind of play into what types of businesses you're trying to attract? What kinds of people you're trying to attract to your town or your community? And then I think engagement. I mean, because it's a process, the more people you get engaged in economic development, the more successful you're going to be. And that means the private sector, your partners, your residents, your volunteers. So the broader you kind of engage people in what you're trying to achieve, I think the more successful you're going to be.
Economic development is a crucial part of any municipality. It's in many ways, it's similar to funding a fire department. You know, you may never have a fire in your town, but you would never stop funding your fire department because it's nice to know it's there when you need it. And economic development is not unlike that. It's when you're trying to attract an industry to your community, it's important that you have all your tools in place. By investing in economic development, you invest in those tools, and while you may not see a return within the first year or two, when the time is right, you will have accumulated the information, the tools, the knowledge that you need to actually attract an industry there. So it involves a lot of planning and foresight, I guess, to understand it takes time to do economic development, and it takes the tools which they're going to have to develop.
Building relationships within your community, having everybody agree as much as possible, because agreement is never universal, but having agreement within your community of really where you want to go. And some communities are really interested in expanding their population base and expanding their industrial base, diversifying their economy. Others, are more focused on a lifestyle for their residents and how they want to be. So understand that. The old saying is, if you don't know where you're going, any bus will do. And it's really, really true in economic development. Understanding the skill sets that you require in the community and getting the timing right. Depending on where your community is in terms of its growth and where it wants to go, you might find that at some point your economic development team, your person, your committee might be really focused on marketing skills, might be really focused on branding and promotion. You, at a different point in your economic development life cycle, you might find that you're looking for somebody who has really deep connections into a particular industry. For instance, if you are diversifying within the energy sector, you might want somebody who really knows a lot about that sector and is willing to, within the strategy and the vision for your community, to push on that. The third piece is probably focused around, or lends itself to all of that, is having leadership within the community that is prepared for the long haul and really, really committed to taking the slings and arrows that will come their way from internally and externally, and being prepared to listen and hear from the community, but also being prepared to advocate for a vision and to work towards it over a very long cycle.
Coming back to what I said previously, data. I mean, you have to have something. If you're building programs and strategies and you're just throwing darts at the wall, like that's not helpful. You need to understand, this is what I have. This is where the real opportunities are and how it fits. So that data is fundamental, having it. And I know that it's tough in Canada. We do not have the data sources that the US has, the depth, but there are programs, there are things you can do to make sure that you get that on the ground data as far as how many businesses do you have? What industries are they in? How many employees do they have, full-time, part-time? So that's important. That's as a start. I think the next thing, a lot of, like when I first started in economic development, I was a little younger, but I also remember that profession was very much in its infancy. And what it was is, I mean, people would think it was, let's take, and this is going to sound terrible, but let's take a bottle of scotch and we'll go to China and we'll meet with a business and we'll basically give them our bottle of scotch, slap them on the back and say, come on to Alberta. Well, that's really not what economic development is and hasn't been for many years. So I think, you know, what a lot of elected officials don't understand, it's economic development. Yes, it is about investment attraction. It is about bringing new businesses to your community, and it may mean bringing them from another country. I'm not disregarding that, but 80 to 90% of your new business investment is going to come from your existing business community. So working with who's in your backyard today, that has to be your priority. So if you're going to put your resources anywhere, it is hoofing it on your street and going, talking, meeting with your local business community, having coffee with them and saying, hey, how are you doing? What could we be doing as a municipality or as a council to make your life more successful here, to make you want to hire more people and make you want to build more in this community? So that has to be fundamental. And the other thing is, in doing that, you're going to find out how can you make your council, your community more business friendly. So does that mean you have to change some of the zoning restrictions, change some of the way you permit, some of the processes that you have at your town or your county, make it easy for businesses? Because I gotta say, there's a lot of communities that say, oh, we're business friendly. But then when you do a bit of an analysis of their processes, they're not business friendly. They're making it more and more difficult for businesses to be successful. So I think between the data, between making sure you focus locally and making sure that however you interact with those businesses is streamlined and easy for them, that's when you're going to have success.
Know what it is you want, need, and will build your community for you. So knowing if your community is more tourism based is extremely important, because if you're not tourism based, why bother even trying to attract a tourism based industry? It's not going to work. If you live in a largely agricultural community, then you're going to focus on agricultural type, value added processing. And by that, I don't mean just, attracting a pea pulse processing facility that's going to, bring in 100 employees. It may be something much, much simpler, such as you may have hemp being grown in your community and you'll have a local entrepreneur who will make products out of hemp. And it could be candles, could be soap, could be whatever they choose to make. So I think really knowing what your strength in your community is and focusing on that is probably one of the number one. I think you have to know what your strengths on a people basis is. To attract any industry, any business, you're going to need employees, and employees are one of the largest challenges for anybody that's coming in with economic development ideas. You can bring in a new developer who's going to create an industry that employs 25 people. But if you don't have the people in your community, you need to figure out how you're going to get them there. One of the key challenges you're going to have is housing. Will you have the housing to accommodate them? It's not like the olden days where, you could rent or buy a house in a small community for $40,000. Rural communities now can be just as expensive as the larger urbans. And why does somebody want to move there? So, making sure that you have a housing inventory, that you have a people inventory, and then again, looking at who you're attracting. Do they have kids? Then you're going to need proper schools as well. You're going to need proper extracurricular activities in the community. What kind of health opportunities do you offer? Do you have a hospital? Do you have a medical clinic? Do you have a doctor? Do you have a dentist? All those things are extremely key. And I guess the third one would be actually developing that whole inventory of everything so that you actually have an inventory of even every type of business that you have in your community. Depending what kind of industry you're trying to attract, they likely need service industries that service them. And having them in the community is a huge asset. And if you don't, then those are other potential opportunities that you could use to attract to your community.
I'm a big believer in doing fewer things well. And sometimes because we live in a world where there are so many opportunities available to us and so many different ways of getting from A to B, that we just madly run off in all directions. And it's just better to pick one thing, even if you can only do one thing and do it well. That's a message that you're sending out into the world, and it's a reputation that will come back to your community. And so if you can demonstrate that you're capable as a community of doing projects well, of answering questions well, that sort of thing, that will serve you well in your economic development efforts, because people talk, people in the investment community talk. And if they know that you're reliable, even if it's on a very narrow set of skills or a very narrow set of assets that you might have, that reputation will take you a long way.
You'll never be able to do everything. Like, all the things you want to do as a council, as a municipality. So to me, first and foremost, you got to understand what your core business is. Like, if there's things you're doing right now and you don't need to do them, or it's the private sector that should be doing it, get out of that business. Do not be doing it, because you need resources. You need your limited resources to be put to things that are your core business that nobody else is doing and that you need to do in order to have a successful, sustainable community. So I think, first of all, understand where do you add the most value? Where is your rightful place? And I think then in investing in things that matter. And those are things like infrastructure. If you want to attract a business to your community or keep a business, what are the things that are going to be important to them? Well, it is infrastructure. It's quality of life. If I can live anywhere, and COVID has shown us that I can live anywhere, I'm going to look at quality of life. I might like the fact that I can just walk down the street and be at work in 5 minutes, or not have to drive or work out of my house, as long as I have high-speed internet. It doesn't matter where I am. I could live at the lake. I could live in a forest. So that's the kind of thing. So what are the kinds of important infrastructure pieces that are going to be important? If my business requires a lot of water or a lot of electricity or access to airports or train stations, like, it just depends, right? So thinking of what is important for businesses, the types of businesses we're trying to attract, and making sure that whatever they need to be successful, I have. And I think the other thing is, and we don't do it enough in Canada, I don't think, is reward entrepreneurship and help nurture it, because that's the creative juice that's going to help our communities succeed and be successful. So, whatever we can do in that regard, I think that's important.
For a community most municipalities have constrained budgets now. The provincial government has cut back on a number of things, the MSI funding, where municipalities are now being charged with policing costs. They're seeing it in many, many ways, that the amount of revenue dollars coming in is much, much lower. The new ICFs, or the intermunicipal collaboration agreements that are being signed between municipalities, are impacting rural municipalities to a greater level. Negatively, I would say, they're giving more money to the urbans. That's a positive probably for the urbans, helps them cover more of their infrastructure, the recreational programs, etc. But either way, both municipalities are seeing a greater constraint in the amount of dollars they have to spend on something. Now, that being said, I think the two things you really have to remember, municipality is not unlike a house. If the roof needs replacing, the roof needs replacing. Leaving it until it's too late is just going to cost more money. And the second part is, your municipality is an investment. So while you do have constraints on finances, one, I'm a huge supporter of the alliances, for starters. So I think belonging to an alliance is an excellent idea, because they can help you with a lot of your development needs, but also investing in an economic development officer, a department. Some municipalities choose rather to go with a committee It's much cheaper to go with that. But they still need to look at potentially where do they get the data, the information they need. I can't speak for all alliances, but I know in the case of PRETA, we actually have a researcher who actually gathers that information for our municipalities, and that helps them attract economic development opportunities. The worst thing that a community can do is just decide, oh, we have no money, there's nothing we can do, this is our, I may as well go in the playground and eat dirt or something. Like, it's you have to stay positive. You have to, I know it's easy to say you have to find the money, but as one of my contracts is as a CAO, you can find the money.
People sometimes, or I should say communities sometimes think that they're going to hire an economic development officer and businesses will spring like dandelions on a lawn, right? That all of a sudden they're going to have growth and things are going to be great. And it's just a matter of getting the right person in that role. And the reality is that communities are their own best ambassadors. And it's a team sport. And sometimes we forget, we put too much. It's important to have the right person in that EDO seat, but it is really important that the whole community becomes part of it. And so I think the piece that gets forgotten sometimes is that idea that a community speaks for itself. And even things like when investors come to your community, sometimes they're not announced. They just show up and they're poking around. And if they go to your restaurant or your gas station and somebody says, oh, where are you from? Well, you don't want to live here. This is an awful place to live. And I don't know. I'm looking to get out as quick as I can. And I tell my children, don't dare settle here. That kind of thinking and messaging hurt your community. And so that, I guess the piece that I would say that is often not thought of is we look out. We look out to attract investment, but the old saying of 80-20, right? Most of your growth is going to originate locally, also speaks to that fact that your community needs to believe in itself. And that gets forgotten, I think, sometimes.
Well, I think, there's so many elements of economic development, whether it's that business investment, the business retention, the, tourism, whatever it is. But I think for a lot of people, workforce development sometimes seems like it's not part of an economic development strategy. But I think maybe COVID has shown us it is an important one to think about, because it's your people part. It's the, do we have the right skill sets for the types of businesses we want to attract or that we currently have? I think you find in areas, especially like ones that have gone through disasters. I think of Fort McMurray, when a lot of those kind of frontline staff roles, they didn't come back. And so that's, how do you track that? So I think it's understanding, what does my workforce look like today? What are the needs in the future? And how am I going to help ensure that I have the right skill set? And that means, developing those relationships with post-secondary or having industry apprenticeship programs or those kinds of things. But it's traditionally fallen more in an advanced education portfolio, but it truly is an economic development piece as well. And that's one I think that's under doesn't feel like it, but it's very important when it comes to economic development.
People always think about economic development as just what industry can we bring in that's going to increase tax dollars. So knowing that I can bring in an industry that will be a $30 million investment, it's going to increase the tax revenue of a municipality by, let's say, $200,000 a year. That's wonderful. And we wish we could bring lots and lots of those in. But I think the key part that a lot of people don't realize, well, there's, again, I'm going to have to tell you, there's two there. So one, when you bring an industry in, that's great. You can bring an industry in, they move in, you're getting more tax dollars. How are you servicing them afterwards? That industry will become one of your greatest spokespersons. And it's key that they be very happy when they developed in your area. And I'm not suggesting you give them tax incentives. I actually don't support the concept of tax incentives. I think it's service. How do you provide service to the businesses or commercial opportunities that are coming to your community? The municipalities really need to streamline how they process a development, everything from filling out the development permits, going through the building permit process, assisting them if they need assistance from your public works for, I don't know, it could be for an access to their property that they just purchased. It could be any of those things. They like the key connectivity, and I would encourage anyone who's doing that, call them every week. Like, make a pest of yourself. They'd rather be able to say, good God, that municipality they were on the phone with me every week, but you know what? Every time I needed them, they were there. And I think that's very key, because then they also will brag about that to other industry. And the second part is, economic development isn't always about the tax dollar coming in. Again, what makes a community great? It may be that you're bringing in a not-for-profit group that offers an opportunity to the area that makes your community a better place to live. Because ultimately, when you attract industry, people need to live there. They want to live in a community they like. Most of us will not move to a community that is unattractive, to a community that doesn't offer any services, a community where my kids don't have a playground to play in or a ball team to join. I think those key components are the other parts of what economic development is.
It's been my life's work. It's my heart and soul. It's what I do. A lot of times I think it's who I am. And it's really about appreciating the communities and the people you meet, and understanding that people are amazing. They can do fabulous, fantastic things. And if you just take the time to sit and listen and maybe offer whatever small skills I have to move things along for them, it's within them. It's within them. It's within their community. And I've seen it over and over and over for almost 40 years. And that's what I love about it. That's what's kept me around, and will probably keep me around for a while longer, maybe longer than I should, but it's really, that's what it means. It just every day reminds me of the tremendous potential of human beings. And that's why I love it.
I mean, first of all, it's so diverse, right? I mean, there's so many things that you do and it's different every day. But I think, and I spoke to my board about this a little while ago, we really are in the field of providing hope for people. And that's what kind of keeps you engaged in this field, because you're helping communities move forward in a more sustainable way. You're looking for opportunities all the time. You're trying to figure out what's the next thing I can do to make this a better community. So I think it's that optimism, it's that hope, it's that sense of, it's entrepreneurship, it's creativity, it's something different every day. I think that's what economic development's about. And it's a partnership piece. It's involving everybody you possibly can in non-traditional ways. So I think that, to me, is the fun of economic development, and the reward. You have a job description, but you don't, right? Like, you can create as much as you can.
Positivity, it's joy. When you can do something good for a community, when you can give a community hope and faith, and realize that they have this incredible potential, and it doesn't have to be a lot. Like, honestly, if you're in a little village of 300 people and you get the corner store open, and the people in the community know, I can just pop down there, I can take the kids on a Saturday, get an ice cream, I'm out of milk, I can run over there, after supper and pick up a quarter milk. That's huge in a little village. It's absolutely huge, and it makes a huge difference to the people there. On a bigger level, if it's in a community, maybe you live in a rural municipality where you've brought in a large value-added egg facility, and all of a sudden that community is getting 250,000 more in taxes. You can ensure the taxes of the ratepayers isn't going up. By doing that, you're ensuring the stability of the community. You're ensuring that the ratepayers have a place to live that they're happy to call home. To me, there's so many, they're all positive words. Economic development, it's not always about the money. It's kind of like when people say, does money buy happiness? No, money doesn't necessarily buy happiness. It's what you do with the money that buys happiness. And in this case, I think economic development, what it does for the community, makes it sustainable, brings the people joy, does allow you to offer more social services in a community. It's so diverse, and it's necessary.